Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Own Your Essence podcast, where we get to have deep transformational conversations with some of our favorite people. We are your host
Lee Walzak.
and April DeMille. Today I am not going to be joining by camera, which might not matter for the audio podcasting, but if you're following us on YouTube, you won't get to see my face today. So sorry. Um, but today we have somebody that's new to Lee and I both. She seems like a really sweet lady. We're excited to talk to her. So I'm going to let Lee give her introduction and then we'll kind of hop into this.
Yeah, very excited to see what she has to say. Her name is Michelle Steiner, and she lives with an invisible disability. She works as a paraeducator in a school with students with disabilities. And she is a writer, speaker, photographer, and again, paraeducator. So very excited to welcome her on.
Nice, 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 nice. Okay, here she comes. Hi, we're back
Hello,
again. We're back again.
we
So,
are.
so Lee just he just read out your introduction. So Lee, do you want to start things off or do you want me to just
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, welcome, Michelle. Thanks for being here. We're excited to have you. Um, do you just want to get us started just with a brief kind of introduction to you and who you are, and then we can move from there?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Michelle Steiner. I am a writer, a speaker, a photographer, and a paraeducator. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband Ron and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. And I also have a learning disability myself. I have dyscalculia. I have limited hand dexterity and visual perception issues. That's in my brain, not in my eyes.
okay. Okay.
Thank
Also,
you.
I have to say I love the Jack and Sparrow.
Yeah,
I
Oh,
think that's
thank
so
you.
cute.
that's awesome. Well, thank you for that, Michelle. So as I typically do before we sit down with guests, I kind of look into people a little bit because I want to get to know their story a little bit beforehand and all that. So I did take some time out and I read you have a blog, correct, on your website.
Yes.
So I was reading some of your blog, and there were a few things that I would love to get into there, if that's okay. Um, so one of the things that struck me first reading was that you spoke a little bit about how um, having a learning disability is really a gift, or you perceive it as a gift for yourself where you are currently, but it was not always like that for you, which is, I think probably a common theme with people. And I was curious if you could expand on that a little bit, like what kind of shifted for you that now you view it as a gift, whereas before it was not really perceived as such.
Sure. Well, what really helped me to see it as a gift was I used to always wonder, how is this going to work for my good? Because there was just so much that was going on, and I would wonder, why do I have this? Well, I mean, what good can come out of it? And what I see now when I work with my students is, or just with other people, is I can start to see the benefit of having that. And some of that is I work with seventh graders this year as a paraeducator in a school. And sometimes hearing what they're saying is like a reporting of myself at that age. I hate my individual education plan. I wish I didn't have a disability. And now I get to be that reassuring voice that says, it's going to be okay. I get to show them how they can advocate. And sometimes I'll even see that with my writing with other people when if I get something published and I talk about having a disability, people will say, well, that's my story. Or I thought I was the only one that struggled with that. And I honestly think those are the situations that if I didn't go through what I went through, I would still probably want to help people, but I wouldn't know what that feels like. And it might be a different journey, but there's a lot of similarities. And I honestly, if I didn't go through that, I don't know if I would have that empathy to be able to help others.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of the gift for you is
Mhm.
helping be of service to others with who experience similar things, right?
Yes.
Would
Yeah, I
you
love that.
can I ask you a question? Do you think that when you have learned to have empathy for others, it allowed you to see yourself differently too, like allowed you to have true empathy for your own situation.
Definitely, because I think that was something where I could say, wow, that really is hard. Because I
Yeah.
was that kid that was in school and I had a lot of dreams and a lot of hopes, but I was also really afraid too. And I was not always the most positive person. So I can look back on a lot of those things and I can say, no, I wasn't always, I didn't handle everything correctly. And I just wish sometimes I would have let some of that go, that things would have, um, if I would have known how things were going to work out, I think I would have had a much better time. But I can have that empathy. I know what that's like. And also just for the struggle that I've had to go through and some of the hoops that I had to jump through with going through school, it did help me to have that empathy for myself as well.
Yeah. I think that's really impactful. And I will have to say that from the angle of struggle
Mhm.
to looking at it as a privilege now is such a huge, I mean, that's beautiful because there's things that I've been through in my life,
Mhm.
especially grief related, that I also think now is a privilege because now I get to serve a a certain population, if you
Mhm.
will, that I wouldn't have been able to relate to otherwise.
Exactly.
I think it goes to what is that saying? I'm going to forget it now, but
No
how,
pressure.
yeah, no pressure. Um, that what we go through, like, becomes our survival kit for other people. It's not exactly that, but it's that sentiment. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? That saying there, but
I'm going to pretend to say yes, just so
yeah.
that way you don't feel weird. Just kidding.
Right. I think it was your struggle will become somebody else's survival guide. It's something along
Yes,
those lines.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
fair enough.
I
yes,
love that.
Yeah.
yeah. So it reminds me a lot of that.
But it is
Hmm.
true because like you're the only one that can show up in that version for those students to give them what they need because you've sat in their shoes quite literally.
Right, exactly. Because I understand what that's like to sit in a class and to maybe not really understand something or to really struggle or to ask for help and not get that. I work with a lot of learning support teachers who are wonderful, but sometimes it can be really hard for staff that doesn't have a disability to understand what that person is going through. But I've
Yeah.
sat in those shoes, so I can understand what that's like. And sometimes there's just that emphasis, especially since I'm not a teacher or I've had a lot of issues like with learning on what I couldn't do. But this is something that I can do that maybe somebody else isn't able to do with having the empathy.
Yeah. Absolutely. It absolutely changes things.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that. Um, You speak, Michelle, on your blog too about, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but sort of alchemizing trauma and, turning trauma into something that's beautiful and that really, works for you. And I'm curious if you could expand on that piece as well and maybe share like what tools that you found, have helped you process some of the trauma that comes with maybe some of what we're talking about, and how you've been able to navigate that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the things with trauma that has been really healing for me has been writing. I can remember when I was very young, my dad found a story that I wrote about a dinosaur. It had to be second or third grade. And he said, wow, this is really good. And before that, I didn't think I was good at anything. I was really struggling as a kid. And that just gave me that boost. And my dad also read to me every night whenever I was little. And that developed a love of books for me too. So reading and writing became my world. So I would be able to write my feelings down or what I was thinking, and that really helped. And then eventually, when I started to be able to write about, I can remember putting people in my story that I might have hurt me in a certain way. And what I could do is I could put that character and I could say what I wanted to that person in that story. And I was able to let a lot of stuff go. I was able to forgive people because I was finally had that voice. It wasn't somebody saying, oh, no, you don't want to say that, or that's not how you feel. I could really voice that. And that really freed me. And I think also writing about having a disability helped to free me from a lot of the shame and the stigma that surrounded it. Because for so long, I didn't want to talk about it. I thought that's way too personal. People are going to reject me. But what I've actually found is acceptance. I found other people that have had disabilities that can share that experience. But I've also found that people that might even have different experiences with different trauma, that frees them to be able to talk about their experience without being afraid of judgment. So writing and reading have been really helpful. And the writing about my disability too, I can credit that to my writing group that I've gone to for over 30 years. A long time ago, when I was a teenager, they told me you should really write about having a learning disability. And I said, oh, no, that's just, I don't want to go there. And I wrote some really bad poetry and some other things, but it was just, yeah.
I did the whole
Just,
poetry phase too. You're good, girl.
yeah, it is not my forte, but, but it just, that really freed me. And that was how I could process some of the trauma. And everybody has different ways of how they process it. But for me, writing was a big thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I was gonna say I would second that because I want to say that's how I process a lot of stuff too, is writing it out and journal
Mhm.
prompts and things
Yeah.
like that. So it's definitely a good tool for sure.
Well, I think too, from what you described, it sounds like, it provided a safe container for your feelings,
Hmm.
that you could just bear witness to your feelings. And I think that's so super important, especially maybe if we don't have, because I know for myself, I didn't always feel like I had, people in my support system that could create that safe container. And I think everyone does the best they can with what they have and the tools they have. So it's no
Right.
judgment, but it just is. So creating that for ourselves can be really powerful. And then, as you said too, it gives other people's stories a voice when we're speaking out about it as well, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I would love to write a children's book with you if you're ever interested.
I would love that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
like I totally have a story and all the things, and it's actually about embracing differences and things like that. So yeah, let's team up or talk about that later.
Sounds good.
Um, I would be curious too, Michelle, because I know you said uh, you didn't think that you were good at anything as a child, which I think can be unfortunately, kind of a common thread sort of experience that we all experience some level, I'll say, in different ways, but to some level. And I know on your blog too, you have spoken about maybe some of the challenges that you face, even with dealing with other people who might just not understand or who might be projecting about certain things. And I'm curious how uh, you navigate that now, especially in contrast to how maybe you used to navigate those things.
Well, when I was really young and I didn't know a whole lot about myself, I would take anything that anybody said to heart. I would think, well, if you say that about me, that must be true. And I've learned that people can say things, and it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. Sometimes it can be their own thing that they feel bad about themselves and they're projecting that out on you.
Yeah.
Other times it could just really be a misunderstanding. Sometimes people just really don't understand the disability. And I can waste my time trying to explain it to somebody, but if they don't get it, it's one of those things where I just have to kind of leave that over onto the side and just focus on what I can change and what I can't control. I can't control another person. I can't change another person. It's hard enough to change myself. So
Yeah.
I think that has been really key too. And I also, my dad gave me the advice when I was young too. Consider the source.
Yeah, for
I might,
sure.
yeah, you might get somebody that just simply doesn't understand, or maybe somebody's having a rough day when they do that, or maybe they had a really bad experience with someone with a disability, or they don't know somebody that has one, and they have this picture in their head, but it's not necessarily reality.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I would
Um,
agree with that one a lot.
Hmm.
I feel like I had something to add to that, but it just escaped me. So
that's okay.
it'll come back, I'm sure.
It happens. Um, but yeah, I love, coming from a place because I think that's part of sometimes what we experience in different ways.
Hmm.
But I know for me personally, like I would internalize a lot of things that people would say
Yep.
about me, and I kind of just took it as truth if I heard it so many times, which it sounds like you've experienced similar things in your path. So I love being able to kind of, speak towards going from that point and experiencing all of that, and then kind of shifting to a place of
Yeah,
like you said, people can say things like it's okay, and I don't have to take it on. It doesn't have to become my truth, and I think that's so powerful. So
I
exactly.
think also I think even the point of power is learning when to learning when to share your truth with someone and when not to,
Yep.
because that person in front of you is just not ready to receive that version of you, regardless of what you say. It does not matter.
Exactly. And because people can't see my disability, I have the privilege of choosing my audience a little more carefully
Right.
than maybe
Well, and
somebody that
even
has a,
if they could
yeah,
see it, it still
yeah,
doesn't mean that they'd be in a place to receive your truth anyway. So,
exactly.
right. And
Yep.
so part of that is just knowing when to
Hmm.
practice self-preservation and like, I'm
Yep.
not going to waste my breath or my energy here because you're not ready for me, period.
Exactly. It's choosing your battles. I
Yeah.
agree 100%.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
yeah, I love that. Well said, April.
Thank you.
Um, uh, so this is a bit of it's not off topic, but a bit rerouting a little bit. But I did notice, Michelle, that you on your blog and Facebook and all that, you really seem to like nature and flowers, which I think is wonderful because I love nature and anything, in that realm of things. I think it's great. And I noticed that you often use things like flowers to kind of serve as a symbol for different things in your life, which I think is so cool. And you write about it. Um, so I was kind of curious. I was like, I had this in the back of my head, but I'm kind of curious to ask. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had to pick like a flower that represents where you're at in your journey now, I'm just curious to see if anything comes to mind.
I think the flower that I might pick would just be a lilac because that was definitely something in my life that I have like those memories of growing up, and my grandfather had lilacs to grow in his farm and just sitting there and getting that peaceful aroma. And I have them that they grow out every year in our house too. But I think it's that peacefulness. That's what they're known for, is that peaceful, that tranquil, that intoxicating smell. And I can just go back and there's just that sense of peace and there's that sense of calm. And I think that's something that I've learned with having a disability is just that peace, that calm, that I'm okay with the circumstances that it is. I'm not trying to fight what I have. I've learned how to work with that. And I think the lilac just really represents that.
I love that.
Yeah, me
I
too.
love that.
That's really great.
Yeah, I love lilacs too.
Yeah.
But you kind of said it too, But I was going to say the vibe that I receive from you is just what you said. That you're very at peace with who you are, and you're very in
Hmm.
your own authenticity. And I think just in the general scheme of things, living in the world and embodying your own true authenticity is such a powerful thing, because I think no matter what we experience, whether it's something like a learning disability or another type of disability, or just feeling like we're not enough or whatever, we're constantly kind of inundated with messages from the start, that we're not good enough or we should be this other
Yeah.
thing. So whenever I encounter someone that's like really just within themselves in that way, and they're like, here I am, this is me, I find it so powerful, because I think it's such an act of courageousness in the world. So,
Yeah,
so I love that. Yeah,
You know,
I agree. It's absolutely a major power play. And it's not easy to do because like this place of peace that you're at, it might be beautiful, but it wasn't beautiful getting here necessarily. Like not all the time. It came at a cost for sure.
right. The journey to that was something that it was not always peaceful, and I did pay a price. I can remember just wanting to be like everybody else. I
Yeah.
would try out for things that I thought, okay, I want to be popular. That was my goal whenever I was a lot younger. And I would read magazines like, oh, take those tests on how to be popular. And I would get involved with activities, or I tried dressing like other people. And I didn't think about myself that I wanted that. And finally, it's when I kind of broke free. I think I was about in 10th or 11th grade, and I thought, I'm going to go out and find a group of people outside of my school district. And because I just wasn't getting the social interaction. And I found people right outside of my district that had acceptance. And that was such a catalyst for change for me because what that did was I started wearing the clothes I wanted to wear. I started being in the activities I like to do. And I didn't really, I mean, I respected other people for their choices as well, but I was finding out who I was.
Yeah, I
I
love
think
that.
that reminds me of like, oh, I'm so gonna butcher this, but it's like you can't get fruit from the fruit tree in your own backyard kind of thing. Does that
Right.
make sense? Like, yeah, like, or if you're an
Mhm.
orange tree, you don't eat your own oranges, like you're not gonna get the fruits that you need in your immediate environment, and you have to go outside of your comfort zones in order to get that growth.
Exactly. That's what I had to do was to find that. And that just changed a lot of things in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I'd be curious to what you said too, if because I know sometimes when people experience something like that where we're trying to kind of absorb into what,
Mhm.
we perceive other people might want to see of us, or, whatever, or trying to fit in a certain way where it's like, let me just kind of, and we do, um understandably, in that sense, kind of abandon our own pieces of our own
Mhm.
self, right? And I'm curious if there was any sort of like an unraveling process for you where you kind of had to figure out, like, well, what do I like? Like, what is me, and or what feels like it resonates with me? Does that make sense?
Definitely. I think a lot of that was just breaking away from the people that I hung out with, or I was forced to be with since for all 12 years of school. But I started to think, well, what are things I like to do? And part of it, I was also, after I stopped hanging out with the original group of the teenagers of that art group, I found an adult writing group. So that just expanded my world even more. And well, some of the stuff that they introduced me to things like we would go to art museums and we would go to poetry readings and movies. And I started hanging out with the right crowd that was a little bit older than I was. And I started to also find that they had different opinions, maybe than other people that I knew. And I found, okay, somebody does share that opinion, or sometimes maybe we had a different one, but everybody came together and was friends with each other despite maybe our differences. But I got to have that taste of what was outside of my own backyard, and it started to develop my worldview and a lot of my interests. And they really supported finding things that I like to do as well. And I got to bring that into their life. So I think it was just finding different people and just trying different things. I was able to see, okay, maybe I can't draw a straight line but I had a friend I argued, I'm not an artist for years. Now but I found I can do photography. And it was just trying things and thinking, okay, maybe I like this, maybe I won't like it. But that just discovering new things was really helpful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Did you ever go through, so I'm going to share a little bit about my own
Mhm.
experiences, but I went through those experiences well where
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I want to fit in, or oh, I'm not good enough for this group, or oh, they don't like
Mhm.
me, or oh,
Yep.
I'm not their type, or I don't dress
Mhm.
the part, whatever it was, right? We all go through these stories in some way. But then as I got older, I got to a place where I was like, why am I so worried about how I'm not this or that for them? I need to be more concerned about what if they're not good enough for me? What if they're not my
Mhm.
type? Fuck that. We're gonna flip the script here. Like I'm looking at this the wrong way. And that changed things for me drastically.
Oh, I agree. And that was something when I got older, cared more and more less about what other people thought of me. And I thought, well, what do I like?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Who do I
that's
want to
not
put up with?
right. And who do I want
Yeah.
to have in my circle?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, yeah, and I think that was also learning how to set boundaries with people
Oh,
was a
yeah.
huge thing.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
hmm And it's okay to have that small circle. I don't need to have that big circle as much as whenever I was a lot younger that I really wanted. I was okay with just maybe having a couple close friends or just having a small
I'm
group of people.
I'm
Yep.
just like that. Like I'm still like
Yeah.
that actually.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people would, would never know that I'm 1000% an introvert. And but I
Hmm.
have amazing social skills. So most people are like, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't like people actually." So like I've got like five buddies and that's about it. Like I'm good with that.
Right. And I think it's funny that that is how it is with me. I'm a little more outgoing than my husband is, but it's one of those things. I used to be really shy because I was afraid of what people thought. And I turns out I'm not really that shy, but I also get a little bit like I do have people that I might select and I have
Yeah. So you're not
yeah,
shy, you're selective, and that's
right.
exactly how I am. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Super selective about who I spend my time with and where it's just where I invest my energy. Like I'm not going to be in places or around people that I don't feel safe around, period.
Exactly. And I've had to learn to put boundaries up with people that I maybe didn't feel very safe with in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And where we can maybe still see each other because they might be friends with somebody else that I'm friends with. And I've had to learn, okay, that's fine. If you still want to be friends with that person, I can but I had to learn to put some boundaries on having how much time I did spend with them and
Yeah.
where else I would see them at.
Right. It's like cool, I can treat you,
Hmm.
civilly in
Yeah,
passing because I'm a good human, but
right.
I'm still not going to spend time with you.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I would actually be interested, Michelle, to
Hmm.
know a little bit more about the your journey of practicing and instilling boundaries, because I know it's such a big thing for people and it can be so uncomfortable. And I know, for myself included, right? Like I grew up and the word boundary didn't exist. I didn't know what a
Mhm.
boundary was. What is that? So, I think we all kind of go through our own process of learning that. And especially, I think when someone, again, myself included, has this archetype of kind of like, I just kind of want to fit in or I want to, and I think part of that sometimes can be letting our boundaries kind of just go to the side so that there's
Oh,
no kind
especially
of
if there's any
conflict.
codependence people pleasing going on,
Right.
because that's another factor that plays into that for sure.
Right.
So yeah, I would be
Exactly.
curious.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd be curious like what your process has just, if you could summarize, but what some of your process around that has been like, did you find it to be super uncomfortable at first? Was that something you kind of had to move through? I'd be interested.
It was really hard at first, sometimes to go against, especially when you're dealing maybe with other people that are involved in a situation. That would be hard because, of course, you want to fit in, you want to be that person. But I always try to give people a chance. And if I find that you violate that trust or there's something that happens, it depends on what the situation is. Sometimes I might
Oh
just
yeah.
confer with the person directly and say, you really hurt my feelings when this happened.
Mm.
And maybe I'll just like naturally just maybe drift apart from that person. Maybe I mean, not that I don't care about that person or I don't wish any harm on somebody, but that just might not have a lot to do with them. If it's something that involves other people, I might just say, okay, as a boundary, I'm not going to be having this person over at my house anymore because of something that happened. And that might be, and sometimes that has not always gone over very well with some people. A lot of times people don't realize that, but then sometimes the same people are the ones that might complain and they're like, I can't believe that person did this. And I'm like, well, that's, why I have that. But I also very have had to learn not to talk badly too about that other person with them. That's not somebody that maybe is ready to hear some of that or to do that. But it just really depends on the situation. And I think that's where it comes with forgiving somebody too. It doesn't mean just because I forgive you that I'm saying everything is great that happened. Sometimes that forgiveness can just be like, I let go of this bitterness that I have towards you, and I wish you well in your life, but I can't have you in my life for that reason, but I wish you all the best and I just let go of the bitterness and just wish
Yeah.
you well.
Well, and I think that's really powerful too, because some of that forgiving or so-called
Hmm.
forgiving is really just acceptance of you and I are in different places.
Yep.
You're not wrong for being where you're at, but it doesn't fit into the story that
Hmm.
I'm living right now, and that's okay. We're just go our separate paths.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I love that. And I agree with April. I think what you just said is so powerful because it's this kind of acknowledgement, as you were saying, of like, I'm releasing this for myself.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean that I want you back in my space or that, I don't want to have these boundaries around you anymore. It's just that I am extending this forgiveness because I'm letting go of it for me as well, you know?
Yeah. And it also doesn't mean I'm sitting here talking shit about you or shaming you for being different in your journey than I am.
Yep.
It just means that our journeys don't mix well together and they have to be separate. That's all.
Exactly. Yep. You go your way, I go mine, and yep, I wish you well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Um, were you going to say something, April? Sorry.
No, I don't,
Oh, okay.
maybe, I don't, possibly, I have no idea.
I thought I heard something. Okay. Um, I would love to circle back though for a minute, Michelle, about because you
Hmm.
work as a paraeducator and you work with students, as you were saying that, have some of these disabilities and things like that. And
Hmm.
I'd be curious just to talk more about that and like what your role in some of that is. And because again, I know we touched on how impactful it probably is for them having someone who is working with them that understands, this person has been in my exact shoes, so uh, yeah.
Right. Well, I feel really blessed to be able to work with the students that I do work with. All the kids, I'm able to help them out with their reading, and all the kids know I can help them with anything except for math, or else they'll soon find out I am not able to help out with math and science. But what I can do though is I also go another step forward is I show them how to advocate, because
Mm,
I think it's so important that we show our students how to speak up for themselves. And our students one day will end up leaving me, they'll graduate and hopefully have a life where they're able to chase whatever dream they have. But for so many of them, their disability is going to stay. And I think it's so important that they learn right now how to advocate, how to handle that so that they can be successful in the future. And a lot of times I'll have students that are really afraid. I had a student before that was really scared to ask for help. She didn't understand what was going on. I wasn't in her class. And I said, okay, well, let's go ask for help. Well, I'm scared. I said, well, I'll go with you. I'll show you how to do that. And that girl wasn't afraid anymore. She was getting the help that she needed. I had another student too. He was struggling in a class and it involved math and I couldn't help him and I felt so helpless and I just looked up at the sky and I thought, why am I here? Why am I doing this? I can't, I obviously can't do this. And somebody said, the student was crying. And I went over to him and I got on eye level and I said, I know how frustrating it is. I'm not able to help you, but I want you to tell me when you are struggling so I can find someone to help you. And
mm,
that student wasn't crying anymore after that point. He was raising his hand, asking for help, and knowing what to do when he does struggle in the classroom. So I think sometimes the job goes beyond just being in the room helping students with their work. I'm trying to give them skills that they can use when they leave.
Yeah. Like you're teaching them how to be resourceful and how to use
Hmm.
their voices, even if it's scared and shaking.
Yep.
And those are going to be lessons and valued, it's going to be valuable their entire lives.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that piece of the story that you just shared, where you were saying I looked up at the sky and I was thinking, why am I here? And then you went over to him, and it's interesting to me, I think, how life kind of sets this up sometimes. One minute we're kind of questioning, what am I doing? And then the next it's like glaringly obvious, oh, this is why I'm here. And I think it's so powerful in what you just shared because to me, what I heard from that was that you witnessed him and you heard him and met him where he was at and said,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? I see you, I understand this, and I can find someone else to help, you know. And I think at the end of the day, that's what so many of us really are looking for, is just to be met in a certain way,
Yeah.
to be heard and to be
Mhm.
witnessed. And I would argue that that is exactly, you know, why you were in that space at that time, right?
And
Yeah,
actually,
exactly.
Lee, that's such a beautiful thing to say too, because I agree that sometimes it's not your job to help in that moment in that certain way, but you can still be there to witness and guide him to other sources, you know, like it's you're still helping, but not in the way that you thought, you know?
Exactly, because that I can help somebody like with getting resources or
Yeah.
helps. I can sometimes I have a student that might just need somebody to sit with them, almost like a body double for someone that has a disability that can be
Yeah.
helpful to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
But we're
Mhm.
trying to give them those resources so that they can do that. Uh, a lot of my students too, they have to find out on their own. That is I've had my experience with school and I'm here to help and offer guidance and facilitate. But some of them, they're going to have to go through a lot of this themselves too and to find what does work. And it's their journey.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the advocating piece is so powerful, you know,
Mhm.
teaching anyone to be able to advocate for themselves in any sense, I think is such a powerful thing and such a impactful tool that we can all take with us, you know. So
Sure.
yeah.
Um, Michelle, you know, I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier, but can you explain for those of us that might not know what dyscalculia is? Did I even say that right? I don't even know if I
Yes,
said
you
that right. Okay.
did. Yeah,
Yeah, if you could expand on that, because
sure.
I know that I know a little bit about it, but I would love to hear more from you about that.
Awesome. Dyscalculia is a math learning disability, but it's not seeing numbers backwards. It's just, I have difficulty with how numbers work.
Right.
So I will often get lost in the steps of a problem. I might not understand how all those numbers work. I'm not able to tell the time on the face of a clock. I have not mastered all my multiplication, addition, subtraction facts.
Mhm.
It's really difficult for me to be able to budget.
I was
It's
actually
also,
going to ask that. I was going to
yeah,
follow, that was going to be my follow-up question is how that
I
impacts your personal life when it comes to budgeting and banking and all the things. So,
It's like speaking a different language.
okay.
I'm
Okay.
not, yeah, very good. I'm definitely not good with that. It can also be hard if I'm out in public, like if I am at a restaurant, I have to use my phone to calculate a tip. And it can also be difficult if I'm at the store. It's really interesting. If you give me $20, I can visualize the dollars and the coins, and I can get a range of what I'm spending. But if you hand me a credit card or a debit card, it's too much of an abstract concept, and I have
Yeah.
no idea what I'm spending.
Yeah. So it's
Um,
kind of overwhelming and just kind of shuts you down instead.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't know
Yeah.
how much I'm spending. It's just I can't visualize it, so it's
Yeah.
really difficult.
Yeah.
I also confuse my right from my left.
Okay.
So that has impacted that. But that also goes with the visual perception. It's in my brain, not in my eyes. So the light bulb just kind of went off whenever we figured out that I couldn't drive because of my
I
disability.
was going to ask, like, if you're listening
Hmm.
to GPS and it's like, turn right here. And then, like, do you turn left? Do you turn right? Like, how does that, like, affect you that way?
Right. Now, my husband does the driving, and yes,
Okay.
we do our
Okay.
GPS, and
Yeah.
I kind of look out for signs and different
Okay.
things too. But what I can do is what's really hard for me with right and left. One
Okay.
of the first things they notice, like if you give me a pair, like if we're trying on shoes, I couldn't tell you what shoes, the right foot or the left foot.
Okay.
And if you say right or left, I'll hold up both of my hands because I can get them confused really easily.
Okay.
And that was even an issue whenever I worked in childcare centers and the kids would take their shoes off. And I had to put their shoes on and I couldn't tell if it was on the right foot or the left foot. And sometimes I had employers that couldn't understand this, why I couldn't do that.
Okay.
And so that was a difficulty for me. And it also goes in with having the limited hand dexterity is another part of just how the disability all comes from one source. For years, I would blink whenever an object would come at me, or things would fall out of my hands. People thought I was just clumsy and my handwriting's never been that great. And then they diagnosed me in an evaluation for having limited hand dexterity in both of my hands. And another light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, that's why it's hard for me to be able to unlock doors and to be able to use a can opener. But all of these things just stem from having a brain that is just wired differently.
Okay. Did they ever talk about like why or what they suspect might have happened in order for in order for it to be wired so differently?
Nobody really knows what causes learning
Okay.
disability. Sometimes
Okay.
it can be genetic. Yeah, we really don't know.
Yeah, you just never know what the root cause is. It is just it is what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing. And I think it's a testament to that, sometimes when we get certain answers or we can put certain words to things that, it can be so helpful and even healing in a way.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then we have a name for something and we're like, oh, okay, this is what's happening and this makes sense to me, which also I think is another great part about, you speaking out and sharing your story and all of that, because it helps people kind of
Yeah.
potentially know what
Mhm.
direction to look. So
My best friend calls it giving a name to your bully, right? She's like, whenever you have, freaking my best friend cracks me up. I love her to death. But like, she's like, yeah, it makes things easier to understand and relate to when there is words and definition and a full understanding of the processes that we are going through. And then we go, oh, and we can make it all connect. And there is
Mhm.
so much relief and healing around that because it offers a sense of closure and validation that you're not fucking insane, that these things aren't just made up in your fucking head. This is real stuff happening to you every single day. And that validation is priceless.
You're right about that. And yeah, it validates the experience because sometimes other people, to circle back, they don't always understand. I can remember
Yeah.
being on public somewhere where we were in a subway station. And this is before we knew I had limited hand dexterity. And I could not get that turntable or what to work to go through with the card in time. That was really challenging. And I had someone that was saying, that I could really do it if I wanted to, and I was just doing it for attention. And I'm thinking, I'm not
Oh
standing.
my.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And I'm trying, and it didn't feel right because that's not what I was trying to do. I didn't want to be standing there trapped in that station.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to go forward and do what I could do.
Well, and that just goes to
Yeah.
show like how limited some people's
Hmm.
mindsets are, and their
Yeah.
hearts are just closed, and there's nothing we can
Yeah.
do about people like that.
Yeah, can't control it. But now I can look back and I say, oh, that's why I couldn't do it. It's
Right.
because you had that, yeah, that part of the disability.
Yeah. Like if we could do it, we would have thought of that fucking 3 weeks ago, Susan. Thanks.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like, oh, that would have never crossed my mind. My God.
yeah, I think it's like April said too. It's a testament to like where they're at.
Yeah.
And it can be tough. I mean, I think we can talk about all the reasons for logically understanding like this person is probably projecting and they're
Mhm.
just probably in a bad place. And I
Right.
think there is this other element that it can still be obviously tough to deal with, when someone just says something like that. So I'm curious too, like if you have any kind of tools for besides writing. I know, something like that comes up or someone says something that's kind of, maybe not the most kind thing to say, how do you maybe not internalize it at this point and kind of just,
Or
let it
throat
go
punch
in some
them.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides that, yeah.
Right.
Sometimes having a delayed response sometimes helps too, because
Mm,
I always think of the one-liners afterwards. So I think sometimes it gets that, but I think just sometimes knowing what I can and what I can't change and what I can and can't control.
Yeah.
And just sometimes letting it go, just taking that deep breath and just letting that go, or just thinking about that, or just expressing it. I think sometimes it can be like I can talk with my husband about maybe somebody said something or something that happened, and I have that person that I can talk to,
Yeah.
and maybe doesn't always understand 100%, but it's somebody that I can, be able to talk with about that. It's sometimes if I have a situation, it's sometimes just walking away and composing myself before I come back in there can be really
Yeah.
helpful too.
Yeah. Just making sure you're
Yeah.
not reactive or
Hmm.
feeding into that nasty energy.
Exactly. And I've had to learn how to walk away from some of that
Yeah.
stuff too.
Well, and that's not
Yeah.
to say that if you stand up for yourself that you're even necessarily being reactive, because there is a difference between
Hmm.
responding and reacting. So you can still stand up for yourself in a composed way. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yep. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like what April said, there's responding and then reacting.
Yeah.
And I have I've had to learn this the hard way, as I'm sure a lot of us have,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there is a choice in that moment. And I have realized for myself, that if I'm reactive, then really I'm just choosing to further enmesh myself with that energy
Uh-huh.
that
Hmm.
I find triggering, in some
Yeah.
sense. So
Yep.
I think to what you said, it's so much more powerful to be able to take a pause in the moment and to kind of be like, okay, where am I at? Let's assess. And do I need to respond? Do I need to just walk away? Because certain situations warrant both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Agreed.
so yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I was reading a little bit about the dyscalculia and I was sitting there wondering, I think I have this. And I don't
Hmm.
know that I truly do, but like there are things about it that even I sat with and I was like, sometimes you wonder because like I will say that math is 1000% my not my cup of tea. I think I checked out after middle school algebra. That was my done point right there. Checked out after that point. Like did all the things to graduate, but my strengths were not in that subject. And now I can still do basic, adding, multiplication, division, all the things. So I probably
Hmm.
don't have it. And I can read the face of a clock and things like that. But there are some times where I can still tell that I have had enough brain trauma from the grief in my journey that it has absolutely altered the way my brain functions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you never know if somebody really does have that or not, or if yeah, but it does change how like your brain does function
Yeah.
because when you're in that constant stress and things,
Yeah.
that can be really hard. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear you on that too.
I agree. Math is not my strength, never has
No.
been my strong point
Like
at all.
literally math is the
Uh,
devil. Just
Yes.
yeah, it,
Agreed.
it just makes
You're
it's like, oh, go ahead, Michelle. Sorry. Yeah.
You either really like it and you
yeah.
understand it and you can't think that there's no possibility that anyone can get it, or you don't get it and you're like,
And I know
yeah,
some people that like
Yeah.
can blow through like math
hmm,
genius level, like
yep.
calculus, all the things. And I'm like, fuck off, I hate you. I'm like so jealous.
Or yeah, exactly. And they can get it and they can't
Yeah,
understand anybody else
I
that can't
know.
get it,
I
or
know.
they'll think, oh, it's all in your head that you can't understand it.
Yeah.
And what I also find amazing is I know some people who do think that way. And they think it's not helpful to say that I'm bad at math, but they're the same people that say they stink at art. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
we all have things we're good at. We all have things that we're not so good at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely think that we are each our own individual instruments in some way,
Hmm.
and we have our strengths and we have things that we're maybe not so great at, but that doesn't mean that we still don't have these beautiful talents within us. So,
Exactly.
Well, I think, like April said, to mirror that, but also, or to echo that, excuse me. But also, I remember my experience being I don't know that I have dyscalculia or anything like that. I just know that math is not my strong. Like it's a total, like you said, Michelle, it's a totally different language. I'm like,
Absolutely.
I don't know. But my experience I find was that I think obviously our school systems are so important and education is so important. I'm not trying to negate that, but I don't think that it's always uh, designed for or catered to different types of learners. And I know for myself,
Yeah.
I feel like I have always been a bit of a different type of learner.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think you see a lot of, students like that kind of fall through the cracks, which
Mhm.
um, is, I think, why it's so important that there are people like you, Michelle, who are, out there and doing the work and helping kids, to find their voice and to find how they learn and all of that. So part of me does wonder too, and this is not to blame anybody or blame the system or
Mhm.
anything like that. It's not about that for me, but I do wonder, would I have gotten this a little bit more if there was a bit more in terms of, um, if it was catered a bit more to the different type of learning experience. Does that make sense?
Exactly, because I think sometimes schools are catered towards, okay, what can everybody do? And it's all
Right.
catered towards
So like
one
more
way
of
of
your
thinking.
like neurotypical learners anyways.
Right. And I was lucky though, at least I did have learning support all throughout my years of school with math. We tried a regular ed class, that didn't work out well. And then I had a resource room. And I see a lot of students now where th their idea of learning support is not putting them, they'll put, not putting them in a separate class. They'll be in a class with maybe just some kids who are all in a basic level, but they have the same work. So nothing's really customized to what they can do or what level they're on. And I think that that's really hard for a student that has a disability, especially in the area that's impacted. And I do wish in schools we could make it more where that is customized to what the child can do and what their interests are as well. I'll have students that'll come up to you and say, "Why are we learning how to do this?" And I don't tell them that they're necessarily going to use it someday because I don't know what they are going to use. But what I try to tell them is we're presenting this information to you now. And when you're older, you'll make the determination how much you want to use it, how much or how little you want to use. I had a student that he didn't want to, he goes, "Why do we have to learn history?" And I told him, I said, "Well, we're just giving you the information now. And someday when you're grown up, if you want to turn off the History Channel when it comes on, you're more than welcome to do that." And he laughed. And I think it's just that honesty that maybe not everybody's going to use algebra in their life, and that's okay. If we have a student that it's not going to use that, even if they don't have a disability, maybe that math just isn't really their forte,
Yep,
or they
never
might,
used it, not once in school, by the
yeah,
way.
exactly. Or they might have, yeah, might have to do it at college, but maybe they're going to like art. Maybe they're going to like reading or they're going to like writing. And that's something that's
Right.
really important for them. So I think it's just, I do wish that schools were like that. And I think that's one of the most freeing things when I went to college. Originally, it was hard because I had a lot of people who told me I would never get my bachelor's degree or I wouldn't be able to handle it. But what I found is once I found what I was good at, and I
Yeah.
loved doing and I was passionate about. And I found the accommodations that I needed. It was so much easier for me than going through all throughout my 12 years of school.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how like when you find your groove, things just kind of the
Mhm.
world just kind of opens up for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you were saying, and Michelle, not everyone's meant to do the same thing. And I
No.
love your answer to your students because I was one of those kids in school that I would be like, why are we learning this? Like, why am I going to need
Mhm.
this? And I love your answer because I never actually heard an answer as graceful and as eloquent and true as that. Typically it'd be like, well, you just need to just sit down and be quiet, and again, time. But I love that answer of like, we're just offering you the information and you might need it someday, you might not, but when you get to that point, you'll know.
Yeah.
And that
Yep.
is such a good way to put it. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
agree. It's like we give you the information and you get to decide where you put that or what you do with it. You figure it out.
Exactly, because I don't sit around with a calculator trying to figure out math unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah,
Yeah, yep, agreed.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, um, April, was there any last things you want to add or anything like that?
No, I was going to ask you the same thing. If you don't have anything else, I think we better wrap this up. Do you have anything else you needed to add real quick?
No, I think that's it, except for thank you so much, Michelle. So appreciated hearing everything that you had to say, and I just very excited that you got to be here today. Very grateful. So thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you both for having me. It's been a pleasure being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. And also, if you have, we are going to drop the information when we post
Mhm.
this, but if you have any websites or blogs or anything that you want to direct your listeners to, go for that and you can share that with us now.
Sure, you can find me at my blog, www.mrsmichellesmission.com.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you again. I just want to put a quick reminder in here to our listeners that if you want to email us with any suggestions, topic ideas, or need to reach out for Lee or I, you can email us at ownyouressencepodcast@gmail.com. And I think we're just gonna call it a wrap. We're gonna say goodbye right here. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.